Hi everyone and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome. I'm Alex and this is my channel where we theorycraft and explore different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today we are continuing the Gloomhaven series of character builds. We're trying to take the character classes from the hit board game Gloomhaven and recreate them in Dungeons & Dragons. For those who know Gloomhaven, we're going to be recreating each of the character classes from Gloomhaven itself, the Forgotten Circles expansion, Jaws of the Lion, and Frosthaven. For any of the locked character classes, I will be sure to add plenty of spoiler tags so that nothing is given away about any of the classes that aren't already considered public knowledge. Additionally, I'm not recreating each character card individually that a character class has access to, but rather looking at their main mechanics, the character art, and the overall theme of the character class for inspiration when looking at D&D mechanics to recreate the character class. For those who know D&D, since these builds are mainly theory crafting and just for fun, there are times I'll be using Unearthed Arcana in the builds. Unearthed Arcana is unofficial material, so it may or may not be okay depending on your DM. If you actually like the idea of using these builds in your game and want to get around the unofficial material, I'll be sure to add some replacement suggestions as needed. Today we're making the Tinkerer in D&D. Overall, the Tinkerer is the support of the starting 6 classes. They have the most healing by far, they have buffs for allies and debuffs for enemies, and they have access to some summons as well as they can get some pretty powerful AoE damage effects. We also know that the theme of the character is someone who is great with gadgets. The Tinkerer is about battle bots, decoys, some traps, and a bunch of other mechanical weaponry. Before we start the build though, let's look at their flavor text. The Quattro Tinkerer. Because of their diminutive size, the Quattro feel they have a lot to prove. From an early age, they are encouraged to study as much as possible about many different subjects. Though there are expert Quattrals in any field, they seem to have a particular affinity for engineering and machinery. Their long, delicate fingers allow them to build all manner of intricate contraptions to make life easier and augment their inferior physical strength. Though they are not numerous, Quattrals can easily integrate themselves into any society due to their expertise in critical fields and their charming, graceful demeanor. Only a fool would shun a Quattral's offer to help. The Tinkerer is a fairly common class of Quattral to be found in a large city. They are experts in crafting all manner of gadgets and elixirs, and they typically make a living selling them to those wishing to indulge in the convenience these creations offer. There are more adventurous Tinkerers, however, who travel beyond a city's walls, using all the tools at their disposal to brave the wilds in an attempt to uncover ancient curiosities that may give insights into their research. Starting with lineage and character creation, we're picking custom lineage as usual. We are a Quattral, which is a unique ancestry to Gloomhaven. There's no real counterpart in D&D, though you could argue there are a few similarities between some of the other smaller races, such as gnomes or other type of creatures. With custom lineage, we're going to get to choose between a skill or dark vision as usual, but this time I'm actually going to choose a skill. I'm not sure if the Quattrals really have dark vision, but I feel they'd be more inclined to invent night vision goggles or something to help get around their natural lack of dark vision, rather than just have dark vision right off the bat themselves. Plus, this time we actually kind of do want to have an extra skill, as our Tinkerer build is going to not just focus on Gloomhaven mechanics in terms of combat and that sort of recreation, but we're actually going to want to recreate the idea of someone who is very capable in terms of the actual skill checks at the game, stuff that is done out of combat. So we're going to want to pick up an extra skill just to have it. While our skill can pretty much be anything that you would like, we will want to make sure that we're waiting a little bit till we nail down what our other skills are going to be before we actually go back and pick it. That way there's no doubling up. But at the same time, we also get a free feat, and our free feat is also probably going to give us a few skills, and here's why. While there are a lot of different options that could work, I want to double down on skill proficiencies. As I said, I want to make sure that this character is good out of combat as well as in combat, as the Tinkerer feels like that type of character class, even though Gloomhaven is largely about combat. The Tinkerer is nothing if not skilled, plus there isn't too much that'll help our build right off the bat, so if you'd rather take a different feat, go ahead, but otherwise I'm going to take Skill Expert. Skill Expert is a nice and straightforward feat. We gain +1 to an ability score of our choice, we gain proficiency in a skill, and we gain expertise in a skill. Expertise just means that we get a double our proficiency bonus when using that skill specifically. For the skill we gain proficiency in, I would take an intelligence-based skill such as Arcana or Investigation. We'll go with investigation since that could be useful for detecting traps from time to time. And for the expertise section, I would say let's just dump that right into investigation as well, making your Tinkerer very good at noticing specific things. Now the reason I'm doing this is because the Tinkerer does have some disarm trap cards, and there aren't really any abilities in D&D that let you just automatically disarm traps, aside from skill checks. So by taking investigation and giving us expertise in it, we're at least halfway to be able to disarm them by being able to find them easily. Unless, of course, your DM uses perception for locating traps instead of investigation, in which case I would just say change the skill from investigation to perception and still put expertise into it. That could even be more useful depending on just how heavily perception shows up in your D&D games. For our stats, we're going to put the +1 from skill expert directly into intelligence. We're also going to put the +2 from custom lineage into intelligence as well, with this net +3 to intelligence. With this net +3 to intelligence, and using point buy as usual, our abilities should end up looking something like this. 8 strength, 14 dexterity, 14 con, 18 intelligence, 10 wisdom, 10 charisma. Obviously, if you want to tweak any of those stats, go right ahead. I'm always partial to a more balanced character, but for this Tinkerer build, an 18 intelligence right off the bat feels like the right way to be able to really grasp the high intellect of the character. For our background, we are going to want something that deals with artisan's tools, something that really feels like a Tinkerer right away. Luckily, Guild Artisan is a background that exists. With this background, we're going to gain proficiency in Insight and Persuasion as our skills, and we're also going to gain proficiency in one set of artisan's tools of our choice. I don't think it really matters too much which of the tools we gain proficiency in, so pick whichever one your favorite is. And we also gain an extra language. Notice that this is the first time where our background actually does kind of matter. If you want to mix it up and pick something else, just make sure it sort of relates to the theme of a Tinkerer. But for us, we want to kind of choose Guild Artisan here because it feels thematically appropriate, but it also lets us narrow down just what skills we're going to be taking and when. So looking back at our custom lineage skill, just make sure it's not any of the ones that we have so far. Now it's time for the actual level breakdown of the build. I doubt this is really a surprise, given that we boosted intelligence so much and got a bunch of skills right off the bat, but we're going to be picking Artificer as our class. We may do some multi-classing, but that won't be for a while, and Artificer is quite literally the Tinkerer. They literally get a feature called Magical Tinkering at level 1, so not really thinking that many people are going to be arguing with this. No other class is going to really match the theme for the Tinkerer as closely as the Artificer, so at Artificer 1, we're going to gain the aforementioned Magical Tinkering, as well as some spellcasting. We learn 2 cantrips, and we can prepare a number of spells equal to our intelligence modifier, plus half our Artificer level. For cantrips, we have a lot of options to choose from. I'd recommend grabbing at least 1 to use in combat and 1 to use out of combat. If you'd like, you can mix and match whichever ones you want, and any of them will really work well. But for out of combat, I would suggest mending first and foremost, as it'll be helpful for repairing certain things later on, as well as equipment for right now. And for combat, we can grab a classic like Firebolt as a ranged attack, though notably Thornwhip would give us a very early pull effect, which could also be pretty good, depending on how you wanted to play your Tinkerer. Eventually, we'll probably want both of these anyways, and then some, so pick whatever works for you right now. As far as our spells go, we're in pretty much the same boat. We can choose any of the spells that we like, but some notable ones for Gloomhaven effects are Cure Wounds is a heal, Jump is jump. A snare spell is kind of like an actual trap that we can set, which there aren't too many trap effects in D&D beyond physical bear traps or the snare spell itself. Tasha's Caustic Brew is a bit like Wound, kind of. It's a bit more powerful right away as opposed to less powerful but longer lasting. And then there's False Life, which is also Shield, kind of. It's temporary health, which kind of acts like damage reduction, but isn't exactly the same thing. Pick any of these spells that you'd like, or any other spells that you think are also really good. Again, we're probably going to want to try and mimic all of these effects, and that means taking all of these spells at some point, but given that we prepare spells, we don't have spells known, we can really mix these up day to day, so it's not too imperative which ones we have. Just make sure you got a couple core spells that are your go-tos. At level 2, we're going to get our Infusions, the Artificer's main class feature. Well, arguably. We learn 4 of them, but we can only make 2 of them as of right now. In terms of the ones we're going to take, we mainly want a Homunculus Servant first and foremost. The main reason for this is that this is our first summon that we get access to. It admittedly isn't the most powerful, but we don't really need it to be. We can call this our decoy bot and have it just take some hits for us as we need. We can also cast spells with range of touch as though we cast them from the decoy's space. With that, we can also use the bot as a ranged heal, which is awesome, and as it means less risk for us. And we can also cast ranged touch damage spells to the bot too, if we really had any, but ideally we're blasting away from afar with ranged damage, as opposed to having our bot get up close to an enemy just to do a little bit of other types of damage. For our other infused item, we're going to dive into the support role that the Tinkerer is meant to play. Pick an infusion that one of your allies would benefit from and just hand it off to them to use. We don't really need to be as selfish as artificers usually are when it comes to their infusions. Level 3 is when we're going to gain our subclass, and here is where the tough decision comes in. 3 of the 4 subclasses actually work really well for our Tinkerer build. The problem is that ideally we want the benefits from all 3 of these subclasses, but we can only pick one. Battlesmith gives us another summon with the Steel Defender, this one being better suited for combat than our Homunculus Servant. Alchemist gives us bonuses to our healing and damage, as well as potions that we can either use ourselves or give to our allies to provide additional buffs. And then finally Artillerist, which is the one we're going to go with, is all about AoE damage. The Artillerist does get a pseudo-summon, it's kind of like a battle bot, with their Eldritch Cannon, though we really only care about it for the abilities it has, not the fact that it has health and AC. The Eldritch Cannon kind of perfectly fits our Flamethrower card, along with a few other cards as well, so we're really trying to take it more for those effects, even though we could have it try to distract an enemy and take a few hits for us if we really needed it to. Our Eldritch Cannon can be spawned in one of 3 modes. Ballista is ranged single target damage, Flamethrower is a short ranged AoE damage, and Protector is some defensive temporary health, or shield, as per usual. The Tinkerer also has some powerful AoE damage, which Artillerist is going to mimic perfectly for us. We'll even mimic it automatically by gaining Artillerist spells that we always have prepared. I will also mention now that while we can't create potions or do healing / support as well as the Alchemist can, I would pick up, if you haven't already, a Herbalist kit. The Herbalist kit allows us to create potions ourselves, along with antitoxins, which will allow us to technically boost our healing capability a little bit, though not as efficiently as just going Alchemist would have. At level 4, we gain our first ASI/feat. We could already cap our intelligence if we wanted, but given that we're only level 4 right now and we already have 18 intelligence, I'm more inclined to say we should wait a little bit and use this chance for other things. Instead, we'll spend this level grabbing a straight up feat. As far as feats go, there's one in particular that we want, which is Artificer Initiate. Ironically, the main thing we want from this build is more Artificer. Artificer Initiate isn't the best feat, but it's got its uses, and for us that's enough. From the feat we get a cantrip from the Artificer list, a first level spell from the Artificer list, and we can cast the spell once per day for free. We also gain proficiency with another set of Artisan's tools, which again we can pick our favorite for, and whenever we cast a spell that is intelligence based, we can use our Artisan's tools as a spellcasting focus for that spell. This is going to come in handy a little later on. With the free spell though, that is going to free up one of our prepared spells so we can get more Tinkerer-esque spells. With the cantrip, we can either pick up a cantrip we didn't get earlier but that we wanted, like for example Thorn Whip if we took Firebolt first, or vice versa, or we could get an extra support cantrip. Spare the Dying or Guidance are always great picks. If you'd rather take something else as a feat, that's perfectly fine, but for this we're going to go with Artificer Initiate to just make us that much more of a Tinkerer. At level 5, we gain Arcane Firearm. This allows us to carve a wand, staff, or rod into essentially a firearm. For game mechanic, it's a slight boost to spell damage rolls, but for us it's a bit more than that. Until now we haven't really had a weapon that we've been using, and we've been mostly either casting cantrips with our tools, or maybe using something like a light crossbow. Now we have our very own personal weapon that will act like our Tinkerer's guns and give us a bonus to our damage. Yes, the Tinkerer does have guns, or at least disintegration rays. We also get second level spells, and Aid is a very nice heal buff. It's more preemptive healing, but that's still pretty potent and will be a nice extra support spell for us to have. Web is also a powerful AoE immobilize effect, which really reminds us of our net gun card, which is pretty awesome. So we'll prep those two, but if you'd rather prefer other things, then go ahead. Those two are just probably the most thematic second level spells that we can get for our Tinkerer build. At level 6, we're going to gain a couple of things. Number 1, we're going to gain tool expertise, which means we now have expertise in all the tools that we're proficient in. Thanks to that, we now have expertise in thieves' tools as well, which, when coupled with our expertise in investigation, should help us make short work of any traps that we actually find. We're also going to gain a 3rd infused item that we can make and 2 extra infusions to know. If we want to be a little selfish, we can grab the Enhanced Arcane Focus, which gives us a +1 bonus and ignores half cover on spell attacks. With this, we can actually use it as our Arcane Firearm, as the Arcane Firearm can be carved into any Arcane Focus. It doesn't have to be a non-magical one. So then we'll have even more damage when we're actually using that Arcane Firearm as our weapon. If you don't want to be selfish and double down on spell attacks, then that's fine. Use the extra infusion to hand out that one magic item that your party member has been asking for and make them the happiest player in the world. At level 7, we're going to continue with Artificer. And level 7 is going to give us Flash of Genius. Flash of Genius is a powerful effect that can save us or an ally from a failed roll. We gain a bonus to said roll equal to our intelligence modifier. It's not exactly a Gloomhaven effect, but I would count this under one of our ally buffs. At level 8, we gain our 2nd ASI/feat. At this point, it's probably time to cap our intelligence. Doing so will buff our spell DCs, our spell attacks, even more than they already are with our Arcane Focus, and our Flash of Genius that we just got last level. Plus, capping intelligence now will allow us to pick other feats up later on. At level 9, we gain a couple big power buffs. First of all, our Eldritch Cannon gains an upgrade from Explosive Cannon. Cannon's weapons now deal an extra 1d8 damage when we use them, which is a nice damage boost. As well, we can essentially self-destruct the cannon when we choose and deal damage to creatures within 20 feet of them. Now, self-destruct isn't really a thing that the Tinkerer can do with their summons, but if you remove the damage, we could just consider this canceling one of our summons to be able to do something else or maintain our longevity with our character cards later on. It's just a feature with an added D&D boost, and it's not too bad to have. The other thing we get is 3rd level spells, and since we're an artillerist, that also includes Fireball. Fireball is essentially the be-all, end-all of AoE damage spells. There might be some better ones at higher level, but it's exceedingly powerful for the level that it is. We got it a lot later than normal since we're only a half caster, but it's still worth picking up. Also, now that we have it, I'm going to consider our check for AoE damage as complete. We're now going to shift our focus to other things, which is namely conditions. Nothing is going to give us access to as many debuff/condition spells as the Wizard is. So for level 10, meet Wizard 1. We gain a spellbook with 6 first level spells as well as some extra cantrips. Grab whatever cantrips you want. For spells, grab any of those that you want as well. Just make sure at least some of them have debuffs associated with them. Ray of Sickness can act as the poison condition, for example, and Tasha's Hideous Laughter could also act as a stun condition. We also gain Arcane Recovery, which lets us recover spell slots of a level equal to half our Wizard level rounded up, to a maximum of 5. We can do that once per day during a short rest, and it's a pretty nice way to get some extra longevity out of our spell slots. At level 11, we're going to go into Wizard 2. Wizard 2 gets us our Wizarding School, and we are going to be choosing the School of Enchantment. Why? Well, let me tell you why. We aren't just looking for conditions here, we're looking for one condition specifically, and as much of it as we can find. We want to get as many action loss effects as we can in order to mimic the stunned effect in Gloomhaven. The Tinkerer has some powerful stun and disarm abilities, though disarm is kind of weird to get in D&D and is very similar to stun anyways, so we want as much of that as possible. Plus, we can pick up more spells that give other conditions along the way. With the School of Enchantment, all those action loss effects that mimic stun are going to be even more powerful, and we get a couple of effects already built into the subclass. One such effect is Hypnotic Gaze. Hypnotic Gaze is a save or suck, so one-time wisdom save, that can fully incapacitate an enemy within 5 feet of us. The drawback is that we have to remain within 5 feet of it and spend our action to keep the creature incapacitated. Luckily, we have an Eldritch Cannon that uses our bonus action to continue firing at other enemies while we remain within 5 feet, incapacitating this one enemy over and over and over again. Now, really, this is an effect that we're only going to get to use once per day, but it's not something that we want to use all the time anyways, mainly just in crucial moments to try and subdue an enemy. We're also an enchantment savant, so it's quicker and cheaper to copy enchantment spells into our spellbook, if that matters at your table. It usually doesn't at mine, but to each their own. One more thing to talk about is that we're going to be continuing up into Wizard. With our multi-classing, we're still gaining higher level spell slots. check out the multi-class rules for half-caster classes, specifically Artificer, since they're a little special. And by my count, we're technically a 7th level caster, which gives us access to 4th level spell slots, even though we don't have 4th level spells. So keep that in mind for when you're going to upcast some of your go-to spells, because they could be a little bit more potent than at first we realize. At level 12, we are a Wizard 3, and we now have access to 2nd level Wizard spells. This is the level where we gain one of our bread and butter stun spells. That is Tasha's Mind Whip. It's an intelligence save, and on a fail, the enemy takes damage and can only do one thing, either an action, a move action, or a bonus action, not all three. Plus, when we upcast it at higher levels, we can target more than one creature, making it a little bit more powerful than we might expect. Even though it's not a one-to-one stun effect, especially since the stun condition in D&D actually exists, but is also quite similar to the stun effect in Gloomhaven, because we can't access it as easily, we're going to count anything that reduces the amount of actions or just outright removes actions from enemies as stun effects, like I had said. There is also the optional rule for disarm in, I believe, the DMG, but given that disarming only works for enemies that actually have weapons and not just flat out on any single enemy that's making an attack, we're not going to really worry about it, and like I had said before, we're lumping it in with the action loss effects. For now, blast away with your Eldritch Cannon, cantrips, and AoE spells, and then when you need to stop an enemy in their tracks, hit them with one of our action loss effects, like Tasha's Mind Whip, Tasha's Hideous Laughter. Tasha really likes stun effects. Or even Hypnotic Gaze, if necessary. At level 13, we're a Wizard 4, and here we gain another ASI/feat. Well, we already capped our intelligence, and even took the Artificer Initiate for more Artificer effects. So what do we take now? Well, that's actually a fairly subjective question. We could honestly take anything that we want that's going to help us with our casting ability. With that in mind, I am going to suggest we take the fairly potent Metamagic Adept. Metamagic Adept allows us to gain 2 sorcery points and learn 2 metamagic options from the Sorcerer class. This can let us get up to some pretty neat shenanigans for our spellcasting. We're only ever going to have 2 sorcery points, so keep that in mind when choosing your metamagic options, but all of them are fairly helpful. For our build, I'm going to take Distant Spell and Extended Spell. Each one is 1 sorcery point, and they double the range or duration of the spell respectively. They're pretty reliable options when we don't really know if we're going to be twinning a lot or transmuting, and also some of those can get a little bit expensive in terms of how many sorcery points they actually require. At level 14, we're at Wizard 5, and look at that, we already have 3rd level wizard spells. Here we're going to take some powerful wizard buffs like Haste or Fly, and you can choose others if you prefer, but those are the 2 we're probably going to go with for now. We are also up to the equivalent of a 10th level caster, which means that we get 5th level spell slots, even though we don't have 5th level spells. We're actually almost at 6th level spell slots, which is pretty nice. So definitely upcast whatever big bombs of spells you've got, whether that's Fireball for damage or Fly to give multiple members of your party an actual flying speed. Either one is going to be a really nice buff, and then of course maybe there's some other spells like Aid or something that we previously got that could also provide a major benefit when upcast. At 15th level, we are Wizard 6, and we get the next enchantment wizard feature. We get Instinctive Charm. Instinctive Charm is an attack redirect where we can make an enemy creature redirect its attack to another creature within range. It's a wisdom save, so it isn't guaranteed to work, and it also isn't likely to be useful against melee attacks. It does have some potential to pair well with our Hypnotic Gaze feature, but like I said, that isn't really our go-to. We'll take it because we want to go up into higher levels of Enchantment Wizard, but we'll probably only be using this feature once in a while as opposed to very reliably. At level 16, we're going to go Wizard 7, and we finally have 4th level spells. We've had the spell slots for a while, but we finally have the actual spells themselves. We want these for our summons of all things. We can now take Summon Construct, which is going to count as our new battle bot or kill bot summon, and we can even upcast it to make it more powerful. With this, our cannon and our homunculus, the summon part of our build is pretty much complete. We also want to take Ralathim's Psychic Lance here, or however you pronounce the name, the Psychic Lance spell. It is a single target but powerful stun spell that deals a lot of damage and can incapacitate the enemy when they fail to save. Very nice for single targets. On level 17, we can go to Wizard 8, giving us another ASI/feat, and we really aren't picky at this point, and this is actually going to be our last ASI/feat anyways. Grab whatever you think will be beneficial to you at a high level and call it a day. I'm personally going to take Alert, as I think we could use the nice buff to our initiative. The Tinkerer tends to act quickly, and I think it's only fitting that we do the same. At level 18, we are Wizard 9, and we are going to pick up 5th level spells. Synaptic Static is our last AoE spell, and it is a perfect combination of AoE and debuff. It is essentially an intelligence-based fireball that also causes anyone who fails to subtract 1d6 from their attack roll, ability check, and concentration saves for the duration of the spell. At level 19, we are Wizard 10, and we get our last enchantment wizard ability. This is what we were gunning for with Wizard. Any enchantment spell that targets a single creature, which is our Psychic Lance, our Hold Person or Hold Monster, or even a basic Tasha's Mind Whip, is now going to automatically target 2 creatures instead of 1. This is huge for doubling our stun output. The only drawback is that it took us to level 19 to get it. If you didn't really care about stunning enemies, or you just want to go with more damage instead, then I would recommend not going this far into Wizard. Even just Tasha's Mind Whip, coupled with Enchanter Wizard, was really enough to pass us off as a stunning character. However, in going all this way up Wizard, we have also unlocked some very powerful spells and higher level spell slots than we could have ever done by primarily sticking with Artificer. Finally, at level 20, we are an Artificer 9, but a Wizard 11. Wizard 11 gives us access to 6th level spells, and as a multi-class, we have access to up to 8th level spell slots. We are technically a 16th level caster. The spells we choose here don't matter too much, so pick whichever ones you want. There isn't much to say for this final level other than we are certainly capable of some very powerful effects, just nothing world-altering, which is kind of on brand for the Tinkerer. Okay, time to summarize our build. Really, we are quite the caster. We aren't super specialized, and we don't have access to the really powerful high-level spells, but we do have access to roughly about the equivalent spell slots. We also have used both the levels in Artificer and Wizard to fill those spell slots with a large variety of options to either do damage, have buffs, debuffs, or straight up stun-like conditions that remove actions or limit actions on enemies. We also have access to some summons that we're actually okay with taking our concentration while we blast away from range. The one thing we don't do as much as I would like to do is make traps. We have some access to them through spellcasting with stuff like Snare or Glyph of Warding if we had taken those, but otherwise there isn't too much that we'll really get to do with those. Everything else is pretty much exactly what the Tinkerer ordered though. We can be a major support, we can be a controller, or we can be a damage dealer depending on what our party needs in the moment. And we aren't afraid to fill all those roles at once if need be. Let me know what you thought of this build or what you would change to get closer to the actual theme of the Gloomhaven character class. Thank you for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.